Hi, this is Simon Phillips. Welcome back to this further session in our Changemaker Summit this week. I'm delighted today to be joined by Simon Hardacre and Nikki Carew, and we're going to be talking to you about how do you go about creating a culture of high performance. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So let me just ask you how not. I tell you what, should I start all that again? Oh, I can't, we're live. Anyway, how do you create a culture of high performance in your organization and sustain it? That's the key issue. In the next 40 to 45 minutes, we're going to look at what we think are the common characteristics of a high performing culture, aspects that you can focus on in your organization to create higher performance. Between us, we've identified 4 critical areas, and Simon Hardacre, communications and engagement consultant, and Nikki Carew, executive and business coach, will take you through each of these. At the end of this webinar, they'll give you a simple diagnostic to help you see where you should focus your resources to root high performance into the culture of your organization. So that's our introduction. We've got a lot to live up to. So I'm just going to hand over first to Simon to introduce himself, and then Nikki, and then we'll get started. So Simon, over to you.
Okay, so I've been a leader in internal comms and engagement for something over 15 years now, helping companies like Rolls-Royce and GKN and Transport for London, BG Group and so forth to find ways to coordinate their effort towards delivering that high-performing culture. Okay, Nikki?
Well, I've been an executive coach for about 20 years now, which means that I've been coaching senior leaders in organisations long before it was a recognised intervention. But I got an MSc in executive coaching. I'm accredited by Ashridge Business School, and I'm co-author of Behind Closed Doors, Stories from the Coaching Room. I think also what's important for me is that I've got a strong business background too, from working with Sainsbury's, and I joined consultancies, became account director for Pedigree Pet Foods business. And then I took a sideways move into being an operations director with Outplacement, where we designed reputably the best career coaching results at that time. Client companies were asking us, well, why was the work that we were doing for people leaving their organisation, why wasn't that invested back into those who were their future? So hence my arrival at executive coaching. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you, Nikki. Right, I've got a couple of bits of what do they call it? Housekeeping. Just to before we start. So the first is, if you are on Twitter and you want to join in the conversation, #Changemakers is where you'll find us. You can also pop your questions on there if you have any. You'll notice in the chat box you can leave comments, you can ask us questions, and we'll be doing a structured Q&A at the end of the presentation from Simon and Nikki. So feel free to do that. Now, what we've found over the course of the week is that a number of people, in fact most people, have been watching these sessions on the replay. And it was just to let you know that you can ask questions in the replay as well, and they will come through, and Simon and Nikki and I will do our best to answer them even after the event. So feel free to write those away. Now, the final thing to say is we're live, we're on the internet, and things happen when you're on the internet that are sometimes unscheduled. We call them a plot twist, so don't worry about them. It shouldn't interrupt your pleasure, if you like, for too long, and we'll be straight back in action as soon as we can be. But that's just in case anything happens untoward. Okay, let's get started. So I've got a question here for Simon. What's going on in companies that are good at creating and sustaining great cultures?
That's a great question. Maybe I'll start with, so in his book, The Fifth Discipline, Peter Senge summed up a high-performing culture like this. And so he said it's where people continually expand their capacity to create results, where new and expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured, collective aspirations set free, and people are continuously learning how to learn together. I wrote to you recently on LinkedIn about how Dave Ulrich and Wayne Rockbank view culture, and they they talked about it as a kind of, it's in the way our customers experience our culture when they work with our people. So, when they're those moments of truth, if you like, and how that reflects and then builds on internal cultures. Yeah.
Okay, so what goes up to making a high performance company?
Okay. Well, I love Anna Karenina's quote on this. She says, or rather Leo Tolstoy's quote in Anna Karenina. They say, all happy families are alike, while each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And I guess it's the same with high-performing organizations. They all share some similar characteristics. And I guess, so what are these? And from our own work, observations and drawing on research like Peter Senge's, Dave Ulrichs and Wayne Brockbank, we've identified what we think are 4 really important aspects that we think make up a high-performing organization. So Simon, can you stick the slide up, please?
Sure.
So here they are. So the 4 things we think: purpose, agility, leadership, and engagement. And we're going to talk about those for the next sort of 20 minutes or so. I'm going to start off with sort of purpose and agility, and then Nikki will take over for leadership and engagement. So anyway, the first of these, purpose. So we're defining a clear purpose as what we want to achieve together for someone or something else. So our customers, the environment, and really understood by everybody and used as the basis for decision making in our business. It's clearly communicated, it's embedded and recognized, and this is what will underpin the development of trust between individuals, between teams, and ultimately business units. I guess without this clarity of purpose, anything else can be ill-directed or at best only lucky. So I guess you say one of the things I think about is sort of really busy and engaged people but working on the wrong things are every bit as bad as disengaged people working on the right things. Also, I think you communicate purpose by first establishing what it means at an organizational level. So here at the Changemakers, our purpose is to be inspiring change makers everywhere to make change happen. So it's not just about us. Gives us all a pretty clear focus on what our business is. We can break it down into what this means for me and for all of my colleagues. So that's creating what I call the line of sight, top to bottom, side to side, why we're up to something together. There's some quite well-known statements in business actually around purpose. There's this one from Starbucks, so to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. And another from Johnson & Johnson, so caring for the world one person at a time. Now what you might notice about both of these statements is they equally avoid the words best or successful, because neither really help guide your decision making in the way that maybe those 2 statements or indeed our own do. I think the importance of purpose is that this is what you are doing for somebody else. It's what keeps you on track, and this is what makes it motivational. And I think it speaks particularly to people's intrinsic values, like community affiliation, self-acceptance and so forth, because those are especially important in the growing influential millennial population. So purpose is also more suited to apply as you grow, even across a large and possibly global organization. So, but as statements and maybe posters and mouse mats, purpose is absolutely without grip or influence on people. To make it really stick in an organization, it needs to be linked to the right kind of behaviors. And I think that's the flip side of the purpose coin, is why I don't separate purpose and behaviors. So how we actually deliver on our purpose, our behaviors. My own view of that is that if we involve people in a discussion about what that all means for them, they set themselves a pretty high bar actually. They don't cheat themselves. A purpose without right behaviors then is, I think, unsustainable, and the right behaviors without direction is pretty random and ill-directed, so you need both, and you need to link the 2 together. And I think by way of example, one of the companies I worked in, we did through workshops involving pretty much everybody around the business, first established together what good would look like around certain scenarios. We then looked at all the behaviors that we thought we'd need to deliver that and hold each other accountable. I guess that contrasts with where you try to write a rule book around what your purpose and behaviors are. And I think if you tried to record every desired behavior in every given situation, that manual would reach into, God, I don't know, thousands of pages. And believe it or not, I was asked to research and write something like that once. So to make this purpose mean something, you've got to talk about and agree on how you're going to behave in teams and business units, right through to leadership teams, and hold each other accountable for delivering in that way. Okay, so that's kind of my view on purpose, I suppose. So the second really important pointer to a high-performing culture, we think, is agility. And I love the quote, you know, being a sailing ship tacking into the wind, not a supertanker setting its path and not able to change until it hits the iceberg. So a common quality of high-performing culture is that it can sustain its performance even in the face of both internal and external challenges over time. So rather than just achieving this culture or high-performing culture over the short term, it can do it over the longer and particularly during difficult times. I think also if there's one trend over the last couple of decades, and even in the last week, so for example in the UK and Tata Steel, then it's that changes happen rather faster and they're rather more complex than you ever thought they would be. I think also to things like the rise of artificial intelligence, for example, could bring changes to our workplace that, you know, pretty few people can really imagine today the impact. I think they say, is it Moore's law, computing speed doubles every 2 years or so. And how's that translated into the ways we work? You know, what's that, the implications for robotics and so forth? So seemingly vast quantities of data can now be mined, analysed, acted on, and in a fraction of the time they used to be. And it's not just about the technology firms like Google and Facebook that have to keep up with so-called big data. By agility, we don't just mean how fast can you be. It's how you set your business up to create and share ideas at pace and decide quickly on a course of action and deliver it in time, real time rather, you know, not stopping and starting. So the creation of new ideas, ways of working, was given something of a lift in the 90s, I think, with the advent of continuous improvement. You may have heard it called Lean, Six Sigma, approaches to problem solving. So a question for you to think about, you know, just in the meantime, is how open is your organization to adopting new ideas? Yeah? Employee involvement in identifying and evaluating performance, coming up with new ways of working, it all falls down if the culture is one that is resistant to adopting new ideas or ways of working. And I guess the secret of continuous improvement is in the name, continuous. So not looking at just the big step changes all the time, you know, rather looking at all the time for small ways to improve. And I guess to use a sporting analogy, in tennis, if you're on your toes to receive a serve rather than being sat back on your heels, it's the only way that pro players can respond to a ball arriving at 100 miles an hour. Enterprise social media in business has followed in the footsteps of and then built on, I think, the success of consumer-led applications like Twitter and Facebook. So you now got platforms like Yammer and Jive internally, cloud-based systems, big data, always on, able to be used to rapidly get answers. And these all crowdsource ideas and solutions. And it gives you a real first mover advantage if you're an agile business. And one example I want to take from an oil company I worked in recently was where a well engineer was continuously breaking the drill bit he was using to drill for oil. So he posted his problem on the internal site, Jive site, one evening before leaving for home. And he got potential solutions overnight from colleagues he'd never met or even heard of from all around the world. So they've been drilling maybe in different companies, but in similar rocks and similar environments. So he got his problem solved in hours. And you know, while the cost of a drill bit's only $1,000 a go, so that's not, you know, horrific. But the time to retool, do it all over again, the manpower that's involved, that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. So if our engineer hadn't, you know, if he'd had to call around everybody he knew, and that's assuming he did know somebody who could find a solution, you know, we'd have been talking days and possibly millions of dollars at a time for downtime. So there's a combination here of a culture of agility where people are expected to engage in problem solving. Then this is supported by the systems element, if you will, of continuous improvement solving. Use of enterprise social media approaches to do the same and be always on. So just some questions really to sort of ponder on for a moment. We'll come back to them. So it's not important you answer them now, but does your organization have a clearly defined purpose? Are your people involved in defining the behaviors that are needed to deliver it? And in agility, how open is your organization to new ideas? Have you created a culture or environment where new ideas are encouraged or talked about, actually acted upon and implemented? And is it systematized? So is there a continuous improvement or something, a system, or is it just more reactive? Do you have a sort of suggestion box and you wait for that to come through? And I guess, how are you exploiting new enterprise social techniques to speed up the process? So making use of big data on the fly in real time. Okay, so I said you don't need to answer all these right now, so we'll ask all those again at the end. And I guess that's it from me for the moment, so I'll hand over to Simon or Nikki to take you through the next step.
Okay, thank you, Simon. And what I'm particularly interested in, what I love about what you're saying, is that once you've got that clear purpose and you've built that narrative to establish a culture of agility, building a culture of high performance, and to sustain it, it's all about the people who can influence whether you succeed, whether they're fully engaged and understand what the organization is about. So for me, the third important factor, and I don't think it's a surprise, it's your leadership. And it's not, I think, about who you choose, but also how you support them to keep aligned to your purpose and to manage your agile organization. And it's not limited to just your most senior leaders either. So any bosses, from supervisor to CEO, this applies to. So the Harvard Business Review lately provided some research that proves that the quality of your boss is more important to your productivity than adding extra workers into your team. So I think that's a good focus. But it's often the hardest part to achieve, in actual fact. As Simon was saying, people just don't behave in ways that fit the manual anyway. And it's estimated that 40% of leaders fail within 18 months of their promotion. It's a shocking statistic, I think. And any organization should be looking to mitigate this. So the very best people who are leaders, let's call them transformational leaders, should be viewing their role as primarily about change. And that's increasingly what they are. They're change agents. Things keep changing. And change is actually, it's not about necessarily these huge events that are happening. It's often about stitching one step after another into the fabric of the organization. And these disruptions are less and less going to be linear too. So this is where they require flexibility and ceaseless adaptation. And in my work, most of it is helping organizations who are faced with the challenge of creating these transformational leaders. And they're going to have less and less time to do it and less resources. And it's well understood, of course, that development programs for leadership teams do make a huge difference to whether the organization has the people capability to succeed. So I can imagine that in your organization, I'm sure you will be doing your utmost to do the best you can with the resources you've got to support your leadership and help them drive your success. But like a lot of things, it's not the quantity of development, but it is the quality, which is the vital indicator of organizational resilience.
Okay, Nikki, so how do you tell what's an indicator of quality?
Well, I think there's two important aspects of development. The first one is you're going to be doing development programs. I'm sure everybody is, but the design is a really important element. And I think the second one is what support you give continuously to your leaders to support them. So if I take the first one, the design of the programs to develop and support leaders, the ones that we do, we ensure they're culturally on message. That goes back to Simon's talk about purpose. So you have to be culturally on purpose, and they have to be engaging. They're not mini MBAs. It's an opportunity to engage people in an action learning environment. So that's about real world issues with meaningful action, meaningful reflection that is going to help integrate the new knowledge with existing knowledge. And in that way, people see the connection, they're much more motivated, and it helps to establish this culture of accountability. And that's on-the-ground application of this agile culture that we've been talking about. So studies show that action learning and maintaining on-the-job training increases their impact by 3 to 1, which is why we talk about using that process. And you have a much greater chance of creating these transformational leaders. And only this week, the Smith Institute research was talking about presenteeism and reported that employees have identified that it's the better quality of the training of their managers they feel would significantly improve their productivity. So they've identified a weakness in their leadership teams. So, you know, no longer are leaders just going to be good at predicting and controlling that's going to help your organization thrive. So it's those who are masterful at engaging people and able to adapt quickly. And you know, I think I'm passionate about this because in fact teams are the ones that see changes happen first quite frequently, and they're the ones who can come up with the most innovative solutions. But now 59, this is part of the same piece of research, 59% of workers who are truly engaged say that work brings out their most creative ideas. But the reverse of that, of the ones who are disengaged, only 3%. That is a phenomenal difference. I think we have a slide to show that, to come up now, Simon, because what I'm illustrating now is too often under stress, what managers can find themselves doing is coming up with, this is what you have to achieve, this is what you must achieve, which is a focus on the results. And this is how you should do it. And what's happening here is you have compliant employees. They just feel, okay, that's what they've said, that's what I should do. But now, showing up in the next slide, is really what we're talking about now. So if you're able to say, this is who we are, and so you're explaining the values and the purpose, and then you're engaging them, and the question really should be, so how can you best add value to that? You have engagement, and it builds into this agility that we're talking about. So that's what we're looking for. So what I'm showing is that high performance organizations here are co-created throughout the organization. And I like to use the analogy, it's a bit like an orchestra. So conductors have to deal with a complex musical piece. And they make sure each musician has what they need to perform their piece. And then the conductor's role is to change the intensity of the music with their commitment. So this musical piece, which felt like a great deal of complexity, now everybody knows their role, and they're able to create this huge experience for the audience. So that's the thing that's going to truly make the difference. And so the analogy links back to, so too must leaders help individuals know just their 2 or 3 critical things that they might need to prioritize and focus on for their success. So that shows that a leader needs, in my opinion, to provide this intelligible information from the chaotic impressions and demands and issues that they have to deal with. But for the employees, they need to help them make sense of these situations and find out what it is that's going to mobilize these employees into a collective action. In an earlier webinar, we spoke about resilience, and resilience being another way of saying that the time between that dreadful feeling of failing and that wonderful feeling of having learned something, getting shorter. So leaders have to be very careful how to handle the situations when things do go wrong. Blame can eat at confidence, and it will eat away at creativity. So how you react to things that may not go right or plot twists, as we call them here in the Changemakers. How you react to that will make a difference between whether you've got an engaged team or just a compliant team. And this is now going to take me to the second point about leadership, which is something I'm passionate about, which you won't be surprised in. It's the value of coaching. For me, it not only keeps development points alive. The point of coaching is to go on this learning journey alongside the leaders and help them achieve and understand things better, faster, with real-time issues that really matter to them and their department. We're giving them time out to slightly distance themselves from operational demands and give them time to reflect with somebody, i.e. the coach, who helps them really focus back onto the bigger issues and engages them into meaningful action. So I call this turning intentions into actions. So it gives them inquiring reflection time, and they cannot help but turn this into a positive performance action. So for me, transformational leaders have to learn to embrace and expect change, and with the support of development and coaching, we're going to help them develop their employees. And it's a way of helping people develop the whole self, and this is now becoming more important in businesses. Rory Hendricks, who's a director of Ashridge Education in the Middle East, explained this by saying the new employees, so that's the millennials, I guess we call them now, Generation Y, are now demanding that leaders bring their whole selves into the office, not just their brains and their hands. For me, coaching is not just for executives. Everyone at some stage in their development achieves a level of mastery in their role that actually they don't need any more training. But they need some coaching to input it in for their own personal improvement. It relates to their own drivers more. And for those people who have a much wider locus of control, this is especially important, as it forms part of your skill set that enables you to apply leadership to your team members with varying abilities and varying experience. It doesn't have to be external coaching. You can set up a well-managed internal coaching problem, which will reinforce the culture to commit to high performance as well.
So this leads nicely onto the fourth point, doesn't it, Nikki?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Simon. It's allied to the leadership, but we identify it as a fourth key element, and that's employee engagement. So what you get from an environment of involvement and trust is a greater level of honesty, a greater level of openness, and much higher innovation when people are prepared to share and develop from each other's ideas. And the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Public Personnel Development report last year highlighted two key elements on this one to enable employee engagement. It's the one Simon picked up on, an organisation with purpose, which is going to the employees can engage in, is vital. And then the second one was the line managers or leaders needs to have motivating and engaging management style that is aligned to the needs of the team, not the other way around. It needs to be aligned to the needs of the team. So it's not easy. So how do leaders achieve this nirvana state of empowerment to their employees? Shamefully, only an average of 3/4 of employees report that they're modestly engaged. 69% of leaders, and this is just this morning I read this information, 69% of leaders trust their company they work for. But what they euphemistically in this report call the rank and file, only 48%. So there's a big trust divide there. Managers seem to be looking up and trusting their companies, but their employees are not engaged with the same attitude. So And if you don't have your employees saying nice things about you, your clients are probably not feeling good about you either. So employee engagement is a key driver to success. Mere compliance means a failure to engage. When you engage, you're harnessing far greater effort of individuals. This is this discretionary effort. This is the thing that we banter about, giving the extra 10% or that 110%. But it's what we want to put in. Harnessing discretionary effort has more to do with feeling that you want to do it. And that often comes down to the organization's culture. So managers must recognize what that is in order to lead employees and to make them to be confident in using these organizational values to solve problems. So it helps them make assumptions about each other, and it helps them to achieve the outcomes that you want. It's that stitch, one stitch at a time in the fabric that creates change. So, each of us can ask ourselves, how engaged I am with what I do contribute? What gets my discretionary attention? In an earlier webinar on workplace well-being, we discussed 4 things that relate to people's well-being, and which also equals engagement. So I won't go into this in a great deal of detail, but ask, when was the last time your organization conducted a survey to assess engagement in your organization and to find out what's working and what isn't? I also want to give a heads up to middling managers, because we've been talking about leaders and now we're talking about employee engagement. But middling managers, and I prefer that title because we all hold a middle position somewhere. We might be leaders in our region, but then that's going to mean we hold a middle position and probably feel quite middling in relation to the board. And I don't think organisation resilience theorists give enough attention to these important people. They are the key influencers. What they say in teams and groups really matters. And so to sustain performance, we need all levels of employee to be empowered to motivate and to have an identity with the organization's purpose. And so, when you're choosing someone to promote, you have to make a call to decide what person will add value to my organization. And it's not always the most capable person. Attitude is all important. And someone with the right attitude and who's aligned with your culture is going to be more flexible, more resilient, more able to change than maybe a much more highly skilled but less aligned person. So you're going to be choosing somebody who's already buying in and feeling engaged. But even then, it's still a really hard step to go from being, one of the boys, one of the team, to being responsible for leading them and involving them and recognizing and rewarding them. So even though some people might seem to be natural leaders, they still need development and support. And even if it's just awareness of the skills and consciousness of the skills that they're going to need. And I do implore you to make sure you do it sooner rather than later, because it's really hard to row back some of these behaviors if they are not on track. So it creates confusion in the new team if the boss is inconsistent. So I recommend that you resist putting people in charge of other people until you have done some development work, and so that the basic skills are known.
Brilliant. So what can leaders think about that might get in the way of developing this high performance culture?
Well, sometimes it's all too easy to pay lip service to this, especially in smaller organizations. One of the things I think is important is the diversity in an organization, and genetic diversity, as Gary Hamel calls it. And the quote here he uses is, "A lack of genetic diversity makes it difficult for companies to first encompass and then exploit the various trends and discontinuities that could be leveraged to create new wealth." And I think that's becoming more and more important in today's global businesses. But diversity doesn't actually come naturally. I don't suppose the moguls who decided the Oscars lately deliberately chose not to consider diverse talent, but probably they had an unconscious bias towards what they know best. And likewise, people of my generation don't instinctively appreciate how the new generation coming along, maybe even the ones after the millennials, behave. I don't think they've got a nickname yet. Maybe they're going to be Generation Z. I don't know. But they seem to get information differently from us. My generation, we're used to the television news and newspapers, and that's what guides me, and that's what I have a bias to. Likewise, many ethnically diverse people don't relate to traditional media, which predominates the old cultures. So these new generations and these new diverse people are going to be at least 25% of your market. So if you're not paying attention to diversity and have diversity in your organization, in your teams, you could be stubbornly missing out, and it's where an organization could be a weak link in sustaining high performance, in my opinion.
So let's remind ourselves of the 4 critical areas of focus to firstly judge if you have a high-performing culture and what areas you can identify where you should put your attention. So I'm going to hand back to Simon now.
Have we lost Simon?
Simon, I think you might need to just unmute yourself and then start again. Thank you very much. So if you hover over your picture, and then you'll have a mute thing there that you can unmute. Simon can't seem to hear us. Let's see if we can send him a message. Hold on. Simon, unmute. Hopefully you'll see that.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yeah, right.
So just rewind slightly, Simon. So
right.
where are we going to put our attention?
So the poll, hopefully coming up on your screens to the right now. And you can tell us which of these areas you think your organization is strongest in. So whether you've got a clear sense of purpose, so that's clearly communicated, pretty much all employees at all levels understand how this should be delivered. Whether you've got an agile organization, able to handle change continuously and be receptive to new ideas. Whether you've got a leadership team that embodies the purpose of your organization and communicates it to the people in a meaningful and engaging way. And how engaged are your employees in helping the organization achieve its purpose? So which of those do you think you're strongest in? Let's ask that question. Just one of those words then: purpose, agile, leadership, or engaged.
So we're getting a 50-50 split, Simon. Oh no, it's just gone up. 67 to 33 in favor of clear purpose and behaviors. Second, strong leadership skills, and no votes for agile or employee engagement.
Really? Okay.
What?
Okay. So the second question, I'm kind of expecting you're going to be expecting this one. So which do you think your organization is weakest in? So same sort of criteria again. Weak around a clear sense of purpose, clearly communicated, employees at all levels understanding how this should be delivered. Or is it that an agile organization able to handle change continuously? Leadership team that embodies the purpose of the organization, or is it around engagement again? So the weakest, just one of those words, or the purpose, agile, leadership, or engagement.
Okay. Looks like 100%, no, 50-50 split between agile and employee engagement. Oh, go on, somebody else. Is there anybody else who wants to vote? Oh, strong leadership has now joined in. So we've got equal split 33% across agile, strong leadership skills, and employee engagement, Simon.
Mm.
So that's interesting, and I think we can turn this into something really, really useful. So if you take the point that each individual of us can do this, the one that you're strongest in, and give yourself a mark. So I think we had the strongest was clear sense of purpose. So you can give yourself a mark from 1 to 10. So where 1 is very weak and 10 is very strong. So you're going to towards 10. Give yourself a mark. So imagining that you think you this clear sense and purposes in your organization is very high, you can score yourself maybe, I don't know, what do you want to be, 7 or 8. And then if you take the weakest one, perhaps we had a bit of a split there, but I think it started off with employee engagement being the weakest. So maybe for your organization you can mark yourself maybe just 3. So you've now got your lowest mark 3, your highest mark 7 or 8. So that leaves us with the other 2, which was agility and leadership. So somewhere they're going to be in the middle, aren't they, between 3 and 7. So give them a score 2. So therefore you've now got 4 scores. And you can plot these onto a spidergram, which is, I think you've got up on your screen right now. And that gives us a really interesting visual to talk about where and what kind of effort might be valuable in your organization. So what we have here are 4 things which are very much linked now. A common and shared purpose, led by motivated people at all levels, delivered through a system that involves team members and delivered in a way that they agree on and sign up to, hold each other accountable for. That's the ideal, of course, but in your spidergram here, we're looking at what the actual is and how we can widen that. What is that? It's not a rectangle, but it's a something-ogram, so that it actually fills that whole space.
Okay, so just concluding, what Nikki and I have had to say about this. So I guess if we're really clear on our purpose and behaviours, so if we've got an agile organisation that can analyse, problem-solve issues, and react to changes to deliver on that purpose, if we employ leaders at all levels that believe and give energy to this, the last component, how we and as teams engage, that's the glue that holds it all together. So hopefully that's whetted your appetite for developing and sustaining a high-performing culture. Hopefully you've too done your own quick spidergram of your organization's current state, let's say. One of the things we're going to offer today is to take that a little step further. So between us, we've identified a range of statements for each of the dimensions that we've talked about in the spider diagram that will put a little more benchmark, I guess, color, rigor into your results. And so we hope you'll find that useful. Email us after the webinar and we'll let you have that. And you can also book a 30-minute conversation and either Nikki or I will give you a call back and go through your results with you and hopefully shed a little bit more light on them. Okay, back to you, Simon.
Excellent. So it's the usual routine. If for those of you who've been listening previously, I'm just putting an opportunity now in your chat line for you to schedule a call. Literally just click that button and either Simon or Nikki will give you a call and are available to discuss the things that you're doing around developing that culture of high performance. So feel free to click that and book some time and we'll get back to you. And if you're watching on the replay, that's also available to you as well. But if you just want to ask a specific question, you can do that in the chat box now. So over to you guys now. What questions do you have while we got Simon and Nikki here? What questions do you have about culture? And I just wanted to highlight an observation that somebody made for you guys that Malk has put in here, which is it's a great point on how diverse audiences get their information. We need to find out how best to do it in each organization and have multi-level methods of cascading messages and listening to contributions. So I'm guessing you guys, totally agree with that. Would you have anything specific to add?
Should I take that one, Nikki? Or...
Yes, you go, Simon. I'll pick up after you.
So I think this relates to something I've done with a number of leaders, but in organisations, and it picks up on what Nikki was saying too. Around we've all got preferred styles of learning and communicating, whether we like to think we're brilliant communicators, rounded or what. But inevitably, we've got a preferred type, and whether that's very rational, sort of left brain sort of communication, or a very visionary sort of communication, we've got a preference for generally one side or the other, and that feeds through into the way we want to consume information as well. So some people want to read it off a page. Some of us, we like to read it on a piece of paper. Increasingly, the millennials won't even touch a piece of paper because they'll have it through multiple devices, probably handheld devices, that they're getting every single piece of information they need to be able to make a decision off, a single device. And it might be coming through several channels, so they might take in Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, but various opinions all consolidated on a single device. That's the way they do it, and that's their preference for doing it. But even by saying, oh, millennials all do that, actually you're missing the point that in order to be communicating something really effectively, you've got to allow for the fact that you'll have people who are using devices, people who want to use paper, people who want to watch TV, people who want to see adverts on screens as they're on the tube or something like that in London. So I think the thing for me is that you can't just decide on using the newest, sharpest, fastest method of communication, because you're missing out on a portion of everybody. Because I think one of the things that hasn't changed is the way that people process information internally, and indeed the way that you need, in order to get to them, to be able to adapt your message to be able to reach each and every one of them. And I think if you choose one method, the likelihood is 75% of the population are missing.
Yeah. And I'd like to build on that too, Simon, because I think those are good points. And it's really important for managers and leaders, in fact, to understand that they need to understand how their teams do assimilate information in order to engage them. Because although you're right, we all need to know how to do all of them. If you're not engaging your employees in the way they need to be engaged, you'll lose their attention. And likewise, those people need to understand that there are things to learn from people who perhaps are not so spend all their time doing things in the virtual world. So there are things to learn from that. So it's about, if you're able to engage people, then you're able to get more of this, communication where, with diversity, you're understanding. And diversity here is as much to do with diversity of the millennials who are dealing with this virtual world, and old fogies like me who like a piece of paper. And so there are some critical ways of thinking that changes in terms of performance.
Excellent. Okay, got another question. It's a bit of a follow-up question from Mal. Do you have any examples of innovative ways for leaders to listen to employees?
That word innovative is very interesting, isn't it? Of course, there are innovative ways in terms of understanding how technology and what chit-chat's going on in the background. And in fact, it's gone against increasingly it's being used in a negative way to find out what chit-chat's going on against organisations. And they're using that against employees, which I think is a very poor way of using technology. If people are chit-chatting behind the scenes about a company, then they should listen why they're doing that. But also, I think there is no alternative, or no, you still have to talk to people, you need to listen to people. And I think getting a team of people together in the old-fashioned way around a table or in a room or in a cafe and listen to what they're saying probably gives you more information than any other way of trying to find out what's going on in your organization with their employees.
Yeah, I think I'd go along with that. I think the only thing I'd add though, and had experience in PG Group where in order to do this at pace, certainly a very rich way of doing it, exactly as Nicky's describing, is to get the people in the room, have a conversation around things. But in order to do it at pace, the CEO, with our help, really he embraced the idea of using the social tool Jive. In fact, we used an internal social media platform where he could engage in a conversation with employees around the things he thought our purpose was about, and really throwing a challenge out to people and saying, is that what it is? And having people come back and say, no, it's not, or it's, yeah, I agree, and it looks like this. And then he moved into values and talked about values around, yes, this value and that value, and okay, so what does that mean then? What would good behavior look like in that particular case? And he was able then to get quite a rich, well, very rich conversation going 24/7. And we had pretty much most of the answers inside a week, and he couldn't have done the focus groups inside a week. Now, that didn't stop us doing those, because actually he could then go into the groups and say, okay, so here's what everybody around the world was saying, what do we all think? And he was able to have a one-to-one conversation with individuals in that group to be able to sort of build on the richness of that conversation. I think that was the really important thing, rather than rely on one source. So if we'd stopped at the social media one, I think we would have lacked the color at the end. But without the social platform, we didn't have the speed. And to my point about agility, this really can allow you to get to the number of it. And I think it's quite funny actually, because I think before social media was called social media, we used to have these things called chat rooms. And back in 2001, I think, in Kinetic, when we were doing the privatization, we used to have these chat rooms for things like the gardening club and the sports club and God knows what. But anyway, we were going through this privatization, and people started to use the chat room as a place to have a conversation with each other online about, isn't it bad about the privatization or whatever else it is that's going on. So it's not like, these social platforms are new, they've just got a bit more sophisticated.
Yes, good examples. Very interesting. Oh, now we've got Simon.
You're muted, Simon.
Here we go. So a recent survey shows that productivity in the UK is lower than most of the rest of the industrial world. Do you think we have poor leadership?
This was the one that came from the Smith Institute, I think. And it's a very complicated picture, but the UK stubbornly has lower productivity. So that's the relationship between inputs and outputs in terms of resources. Than the rest of Europe and the USA, and it's quite difficult to be clear about what that is, and it would be very easy to point the finger at leadership. And there are some incredible examples of excellent leadership in the UK, in the pharma industry and in aerospace, and there are a number of things that we absolutely excel in. But in general, there are quite a lot of things where we don't, and I think it is partly a cultural thing. The report really didn't come to any conclusion, but it is something to do with this presenteeism, that we still feel bound to be at the desk and to be seen to be working and focus on this activity without recourse to actually results. And this could be a leadership issue. It isn't clear, but in my thing I would like to examine whether or not it goes back to what we were talking about, the agility, the leadership, whether there's a clear sense of purpose and how the leadership is dealing with that matter. That would be my hunch, but as I say, the report really didn't come to any conclusion.
I think there's also a variety. If you think about the Nissan plant up in Sunderland, the thing which they didn't import lots of new leaders. they imported the Toyota way of working, or the Nissan way of working, which was all around continuous improvement and involving the whole person rather than just, your hands on a production line or something like that. And on the contrary, they are one of the most productive plants in Europe, if not the world, I think. I think also, in an example, a company where I worked in automotive, again, it tends to be in automotive perhaps, where Toyota provided some of the training for continuous improvement in the production line for the components to such an extent that the production line became more efficient than Toyota had been in producing things. So I think the leadership element of this is the willingness to embrace that kind of involvement. So be prepared to let go, not to think they got the monopoly on good ideas. And the leadership is to decide when actually you need to change direction. But actually, it's not it's not them to explain how. It's to set the direction and then let employees work out the how. Because it doesn't always happen to all of us. We're closest to the problem. I assure you, we've probably got some pretty good ideas about fixing this. And I think that's the neat thing. And I would say that not all organisations in the UK certainly are receptive to that style of, one, leadership, or two, continuous improvement. And it comes back to my point about agility, really. You won't be agile if you have to wait for a leader to wake up, engage, look at your problem, solve your problem, and give it back to you. Whereas if you're involving everybody 24/7 around the world, the likelihood is that problem gets solved pretty quickly, and it's probably a pretty good answer.
Excellent. I think we've got time for just one more, which we picked up earlier from somebody who's had to leave the call, which is, what's meant by accountability and what impact does this have? I think this might relate back to something you were talking about, Nikki. I'm not sure.
Nikki, you're offline.
Here we go. I'm here. Sorry. Accountability is one of those things that employees really do pick up on very quickly. They want their managers to be human beings. They want them to be accountable. Now, this isn't about being the person that is responsible for everything, because clearly it's the other way. We're asking for co-created and joint responsibility. But this is about them sitting down with people and saying, okay, we have responsibility for doing this as a team, and this is how it's going to work. So it's about embracing the whole part of the information, rather than just saying, keeping information to themselves and saying, I'm only going to feed out to you bits of information that relates to you. If you're able to be more inclusive in everything that you do with your employees, you then have to release all the information to them, and that also means you have to be accountable for some of that. You have to, if things don't go right, you have to say, okay, how are we going to fix this? It's a much more open, inclusive, reflective way of working, and it goes back to that thing: bring in your hearts and minds as well as your brains into the workplace, and your employees really do engage with that, and it's much more productive leadership, transformational leadership.
Excellent. Well, and Simon, do you have anything to add to that, or
no, that's great.
I thought that was great too. Great stuff. Right. Well, I've got a little bit of information about the next webinar in this series, which is coming up this evening, and it's all about so Nikki and Simon have been talking to us about creating an engaged organization, but how do you actually do that when you're not really sure what engages the individuals in your organization? I mean, they talked about a diverse population that we tend to work with, and often individuals don't even know what's demotivating them in any particular circumstances. You often hear people say things like, well, there's just something nagging at me, I'm not quite sure what it is. And so this evening, Sue Wellman and I will be talking a lot about this conundrum of understanding what's motivating and demotivating your workforce. But then we'll very quickly move that over to a more personalized perspective. And if you're a coach and you want to see a new tool that we've created that's all about how to understand what's motivating and demotivating someone in the moment, as opposed to their underpinning drivers, which can be very difficult to understand, then we're going to show you that as well. So what motivates you? 7 o'clock this evening, and we'll hope to see you there. So in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Nikki for doing a great job of talking us through the second of the four, the second couple of the four drivers of workforce and high performance, and Simon for taking us through the first two. Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.